Another spontaneous and unplanned video, but I was taking a shower and I just happened to think of this hand that Ray played against a guy that seemed like a pretty tight player, but it turned out that he kind of exploded and just made the wrong move for hundreds of dollars. So I'm going to tell this hand from the Villians' point of view. So we were playing 1-2 no limit at Twin River Casino, and there were a couple of limpers. Ray was in the hijack position and raised it to $14. The cutoff folded, and the villain on the button, he re-raised it to $36. So when he three bets, because he's a tight player, we would put him on a much tighter range of hands. Usually just the premium hands and the hands that are very close to premium. Like the extra hands that I would include might be something like ace-queen suited, ace-jack suited. He might have a hand as weak as pocket tens or pocket jacks, or once in a while a bluff. But in general, he has one of the premium hands, meaning aces, kings, queens, or ace-king. On a tight 1-2 table, those are most commonly the hands that people raise with, most commonly the hands that people three-bet with. So it's pretty easy to guess what they have. So everyone else folded back to Ray, and he thinks about it for a while. And the effective stacks are about $240. So Ray decides to raise small, and he four bets to $80, which is about 1/3 of his stack, 1/3 of his opponent's stack too. So they actually had about the same amount, give or take. So he decides to four bet to $80. Now this is only $44 on top of what the villain raised to. So now I'm going to tell you what the villain had, and he had ace-king offsuit. So when someone four bets into you, especially on a 1-2 table, and you have ace-king offsuit, in general, you can't be feeling too great about your hand. So you have three options. Let's say you always have three options. You can raise, you can call, you can fold. Folding seems a little ridiculous, although I have actually done it before, because a lot of times when people four bet, they only have aces and kings. Now, Ray is not one of those people that only has aces and kings. So when you're faced with ace-king, folding is not really an option because it's just like too good to fold. It's too good to fold sometimes. And if you start folding ace-king, then you're going to start folding like way too many hands. So he has to consider all of his other options. He could five bet and just shove for the whole 240. And on one hand, that seems a little bit ridiculous, like a little bit excessive, because even though Ray could have other hands besides aces and kings, most likely when he four bets, he actually does have aces and kings. His range is probably a little bit wider than most other players, but that being said, if you take the weighted average of all the hands he is willing to four bet with, aces and kings are right up there in the top of the range. So from the villain's point of view, he has ace-king, and he ends up deciding to call $44. And I think this is the most standard play, and a lot of times this is the play that people do when they kind of don't know what else to do. So he decides to call $44. And I don't think this is a very terrible play, because from his point of view, he really didn't know what to do. And folding absolutely seems ridiculous, especially like how long it takes to get a good hand like ace-king. And five betting seems like way too much risk, since he can absolutely lose his whole stack immediately. So basically calling with ace-king, you're hoping to get an ace or a king in the flop, and you're hoping that if you get an ace-high flop, your opponent decides to check the flop, and then you can come to some understanding that you probably have the best hand. So anyway, he decides to call, and now there's about $160 in the pot. So the pot comes out, the flop comes out, Jack 10-5 rainbow. So Jack 10-5 rainbow is a beautiful flop for someone like Ray. There are no possible straights or flushes at the moment. So in all likelihood, his aces are still the best hand. And since his opponent called $80 pre-flop, seriously, he's only worried about his opponent flopping a set. So the board is Jack 10-5. Ray decides to bet $80. Now, let's look at this from the villain's point of view again. There's $160 in the pot. Ray bets $80, and the opponent can choose one of his three options. He can fold, he can call the $80, or he can raise all in for $160. So all three choices seem to suck. You never want to do any one of those. You always want to win the pot whenever you're in. And it doesn't feel good making the right choice, the hard choice. But on a Jack 10-5 rainbow flop, ace-king basically completely misses. So from the villain's point of view, let's go through exactly what hands Ray has and what hands he's betting with. So let's start out with, on the very low end of the spectrum, he could have ace-queen offsuit maybe, and basically all he has is a gut shot to the king. In this case, your ace-king is ahead, but it's going to be one of the rarer instances that when someone 4-bets pre-flop that they have ace-queen. So I would put a relatively low percentage chance of that being the case. A little bit higher percentage chance, I would put him on ace-king. So in the case that your opponent has ace-king, you are going to chop the pot, and you definitely don't want to fold your ace-king if you also have ace-king. So by being aggressive and raising, and basically shoving all in for the 160, then you're taking the initiative and you're not giving yourself a chance to fold and lose. So against ace-king, that would be the correct play. Now, let's consider the even more likely hands. He could have 10s, jacks, queens, kings, or aces. It's somewhat more unlikely that he has a hand like pocket 10s or pocket jacks because there's only 3 combinations of pocket 10s and 3 combinations of pocket jacks. So that being said, it's also unlikely because pre-flop he's less likely to 4-bet with a hand like pocket 10s or pocket jacks. He's more likely to just call the $36 3-bet that we made. So for those 2 reasons, it's highly, highly discounted that Ray flopped a set on this flop. Now let's let's just jump right into aces and kings. Now there are 3 combinations of aces because you have one of the aces in your hand. And there are 3 combinations of kings, also because when I have ace-king, my opponent only has 3 ways to make kings. So there are 6 combinations of aces and kings. Against aces, you are completely crushed. You have to catch a queen. You have to catch that gut shot. So you only have 4 outs. That's about 16%. Against kings, you can catch a queen or an ace. So you have 16% of catching a queen and making a straight. And you have 3 aces that you can catch. That's give or take 12%. So off the top of my head, it's about 20-something%. I don't think you can necessarily add up these numbers and get the exact right percentages without using a calculator. But just to give you a ballpark, it's 20-something%. When your opponent has kings, you have ace-king, you need to catch a queen for the straight or an ace on the flop. So the most likely hand that Ray might have would be pocket queens. Very often when you have ace-king, your opponent has pocket queens because you have a blocker to aces, you have a blocker to kings. So let's consider what are the chances, what are the odds that he has let's consider what happens in this scenario. So if you have ace-king, you can catch an ace, or you can catch a king, or you can catch a queen for a straight, but there's 2 queens out of the deck, so you only have 2 ways to make a straight. That's only 8% chance of making a straight. But now you have about a 24% chance of catching an overcard and just beating him the normal way. So actually, I don't want to jump to say it's 24% because let's say you catch an ace, then the very next card could be a king, and Ray could make a straight with his pocket queens. So let's discount that 24%. So we'll still give ourselves in the ballpark of 20-something% of winning the hand. I'm on purpose not using a calculator because these are the types of things that you have to think of while you're in the spot making a decision. Right now that I'm not on the table and I'm not in the hand, I could use a calculator. But when you're not on the table, when you are in the midst of a hand, you have to kind of generalize these percentages and what you think. So in every scenario, he's not in good shape. You could say that queens is the most likely hand because he has blocker, because I'm going to say I have the ace-king. I have the blockers to aces and I have the blockers to kings. So queens could be the most likely hand. But then again, what is the most likely hand he would 4-bet with? And it might be exactly pocket aces or exactly pocket kings. So in both of those scenarios, you're not doing well. Aces, terrible. Kings, you're not doing well. Queens, you're doing a little bit better, but you're still not doing well. So I think in all 3 of these scenarios, aces, kings, or queens, you have to fold. Of course, if you knew he had jacks or 10s, you'd want to fold. And the only scenario where you're really happy is if he has ace-queen or ace-queen suited or ace-queen offsuit, and that's generally unlikely. And he would c-bet with a hand like ace-king, but in that case, you're going to raise, and because he only has $80 left, he's probably going to call, so you're probably going to chop the pot. So all these things considered, I think in this situation, it is best to fold ace-king on a jack-10 board. Thanks for listening.